weirdos. So.
Black as night, resteth from our sight. White as light, mighty hectate make it right.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Cast a circle, spark some incense, and grab a cup of tea, because it's time for a hair-raising episode of the Cousins Coven podcast. I'm Sharon.
And this is Wendy. I hope everyone's having a most fabulous day or night or whatever time it is where you're at. Sharon, what's on your cup today?
Ooh, so today I brewed some peach tea. It's super tasty and it just feels lovely.
Nice. I am having chai latte.
Ooh, that sounds nice.
Yeah, I got this. I kind of splurged and got this powdery chai stuff that you can pour in there. But I found out it had coconut in it. And since I'm allergic to coconut, I'm going to have to take a Benadryl later.
Oh my gosh, is it worth it?
Yeah, totally.
Nice.
So anything new happening in your life this week?
Nothing too crazy. I've just been doing more like Halloween movies. I love to watch one every night if I can with my husband, and I watched a new one that I haven't seen this year. It was Mandy with Nick Cage, and it was really awesome.
That's so cool. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I feel like the first half is kind of like a psychological, trippy kind of movie, and then the second half you have your more like violence and gore, and it just blends together really well and was super creative. And I haven't been like that inspired from watching a horror movie since maybe the first time I saw like The Shining.
Right.
So,
love that movie.
Yes, me too. So anytime a movie kind of gives me that same feeling, it usually goes high on my like Halloween list.
Nice. Then you'll want to watch it every year.
Yes, so that's what I like to do. I have a roster of movies I have to watch every year. What about you? Have you watched any good Halloween movies recently?
No, I've been so focused on my home. I haven't started watching Halloween movies yet, but I'm kind of excited because we finally got our home office set up. So for the first time, I'm recording in the office and I'm not sitting on the floor in the closet. So I feel pretty happy sitting in a chair. I'm so excited. And, I had someone come to me asking me questions about how to deal with gossip. So I was really excited to sit down and I wrote this very informative banishing spell, which I put on our blog. So if any listeners are hoping to get rid of some gossip in their lives, you can check that out at cousinscoven.home.blog.
Yes, I really liked it. When I read it, there was a few things in there I think I'm going to adapt into my spells, and I liked it.
I'm glad. Yeah. I just kind of wrote it on the fly. So I just sat down. It was like I was in this weird kind of meditative state. And I've never done a spell like that before. But I was like, okay, I'm going to see what I can put out there into the world. So this is it.
And if anyone has any help with spells they need or questions about magic, just let us know and we can add them into our cauldron and we'll discuss them in Cauldron Topics.
Yes. And you can also email us. Don't forget to email us at cousinscoven2@gmail.com. We really love to get email, but we haven't had any yet. So get on top of that, guys.
I know. You can be our first listener. Write it. So on today's episode, we are discussing a few of our favorite urban legends. But first, it's time for Cauldron Topics. And we want to start this off by talking about folk magic and followed by some of our random topics that we're going to pull from the cauldron. So go ahead and start things off with folk magic, Wendy.
Okay, so I did some, quick kind of review on folk magic. I didn't really know what it was when I went into this and I sat down and did some studying. So I apologize if it's not all of the folk magic, but I just kind of wanted to sit down and view a couple of different types. So I did find out that folk magic is from several different countries. And the name folk magic is really a term that's used to describe a set of magical practices that is usually practiced by what people consider to be common folk or country dwellers. Folk magic can bring in religious practices and beliefs, and sometimes it has its own set of traditions. It really has a lot to do with natural medicine and healing practices, which that is always really fascinating to me, because if you don't have to go to the doctor and you can take care of something with your own type of home remedy, then I'm all for that. One of the first types that I came across was called Appalachian Granny Magic. And I was like, dang, that is the cutest name for magic I've ever heard. But
Right?
it is so cute. And so what the Appalachian granny magic was is these people who lived in the Appalachian Mountains. It was basically old women, hence the word granny, and they wanted to use their magic to do herbal remedies, and it was made specifically for helping people at their home. So, things like how to numb a tooth when it's coming in, how to cure the common cold. They did a lot of singing and dancing to bring out a certain outcome for what they wanted in their life. So they would learn it, and then they would teach it to their children, and their children would teach it to their children. So it just kind of was brought down through the family.
That sounds really awesome.
Yeah, very cool. The second one that I came across was powwow magic, which is basically Pennsylvania Dutch magic. This was a set of Pennsylvania Amish people. The Amish are extremely religious. I mean, obviously they don't live the same way that you and I live today. So what they did was they called upon Jesus and Mary to invoke the Holy Spirit in them so that they could use the power of the Holy Spirit to heal. Mm-hmm. So they would have these big healing sessions. So say someone comes in and they're extremely sick and they're like, okay, I need you to help me. So the whole group of Amish people would come together at once, and a leader would invoke the spirit into themselves to lay hands on them and heal.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then the third one I came across is Ozark magic. And Ozark magic is a set of practices within the Christian paradigm. And it uses charms and jewelry and the Bible to invoke the Holy Trinity. And everything is done in the name of God. They used to use dominoes to divine with the spirit. And
interesting.
I know, right? And they performed what they called sin eating. It's a way of saying that they were healers. So let's say someone came in to the practitioner and said, look, I feel like there's a demon attached to me or something. Then the practitioner would say, you've probably done something in your life that was not good and not to the doctrine of the Bible. So we're going to eat that sin out of you. And so they would use their magic to eat and heal them, or eat the sin and heal them.
How would they eat the sin?
I don't know. They just pulled it out. So they would call upon the Bible and invoke the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost to take them over. And then that would be kind of like laying hands, almost like a Reiki kind of situation, except for, I don't know. That's when, for me, when I read about Ozark magic, it reminded me of old-timey movies where you might see somebody laying hands on a person and their eyes would roll back in their head, like at a church.
It's kind of intriguing. Like, is it actually their magic and they're doing something, or is it all like a mental thing?
Right. I'm not sure. I would think that it's mental, kind of mind over matter.
Yeah. The mental cleanse.
Right. And we all have it in ourselves to heal ourselves, but they just decided to pull on the Bible to do it. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of what I found out about folk magic. So
that's really cool. I really didn't know any of that.
Yeah, I didn't either. It was interesting. I do know that folk magic also encompasses hoodoo voodoo, which we're going to save that topic for another day. So I didn't really want to go into that today. It was really interesting. Now I'm going to see what's in our cauldron today. Love spells.
Nice. Love spells. I feel like we've mentioned this a couple times just in passing, that you don't want to force like love on anyone. So that's like a Hollywood commercialized, I think, outlook on love spells, is that you're just trying to attract a lover or make like your school crush like you back and force the situation. But if you find a witch book that is telling you to do that, I wouldn't think it's very authentic or a very good idea. But if you want to use a love spell to just maybe strengthen a love you already have or reconnect with someone, I think that would be appropriate. Or
even if you wanted to strengthen love for yourself, I would totally be cool with that.
A self-love spell. Yeah, that's a really beautiful idea.
Yeah, because, a lot of people don't practice that. They're just, going through the motions. And really, you have to love yourself so that you can give to others. So,
agreed. Yeah, and most people don't have a lot of self-love. It's something, unfortunately, that somehow during your upbringing, you just start to doubt yourself and maybe not have the best opinion
Right.
So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. But in general, yeah, I don't totally agree with love spells. Like, I always go back to thinking about, weren't we talking about this the other day? It seems like we were talking about the one that she did in Practical Magic where she didn't never want to fall in love. And then that guy became real.
Right. And she did a very specific spell about features he would have, like that he could flip a pancake. His favorite shape would be a star. He would have one green eye, one blue. She just tried to make this man that was just impossible and could never exist.
Right.
But he had all of those traits.
And then he was just out there waiting for her.
Yeah, so that was a big problem for her characters, that she didn't know if it was genuine or something she created.
Right, yeah.
So I think as a practitioner, you wouldn't want that doubt in your relationship.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. Anything else about love spells?
Not that I could think of.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay. All right, it says, the outcome of a spell, how it may not be what you think.
Yes, I think that is something you have to be kind of prepared for when anytime you're doing magic, that whatever intentions you're setting out there, be cautious of what you're asking for because you don't know how it's going to affect you. Like we've talked about before with money spells, they might have different effects than you're prepared to have. Like you might get an inheritance from a relative who passed away, but then you have your money after all. Sometimes you might be looking for a change and expecting it to be in one certain way, and then in the end it works in a different way completely that you weren't prepared for or even had intentions for, but it works out for the better. So you just have to go with the flow and see what the universe brings you.
Right. And I feel that most witches write their own spells. So in this, I would say just make sure you're writing your spell for the right intentions, because I'm still, thinking about that threefold law where you may think that you have good intentions, but the way that you wrote it may be in a negative form. Mm-hmm. And you don't want that to come back on you.
Exactly. Well, should we move on to our urban legends, or do you think you want to?
Yes, I'm really excited. Let's talk about urban legends. I know we have some long stories, so let's move on.
Okay.
So, what are urban legends? In some instances, an urban legend may be loosely based on truth. In other cases, it may be complete folklore. Either way, at times they have caused widespread panic. I wanted to bring up a point where, when I was growing up, there was this story that was around in the 90s. So I'm talking about probably 1993. We made it a habit to always watch the news when I was growing up. And I do remember sitting down with the family, we're watching the news, and they did this report that eventually became an urban legend. It was about driving down the road, and if you're going south and the other person's going north heading towards you and they don't have their lights on, typically it's common courtesy to flash your lights at that other person, because you don't want them driving in the dark. They could hit somebody, or they could get pulled over and get a ticket. And so common courtesy, you flash your lights at them. Well, apparently in the 90s, if you did that, it was said that a gang would then shoot your car and potentially kill you. So it caused widespread panic, I feel like, at least in my neck of the woods. So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. And they were just like, don't flash your lights at people.
That sounds like news for you, because they just want, that fear sells and they want people to watch. And I think a lot of news stations, especially local, placate to the fear aspect.
Right. So, I also came across some instances. They're always talking about, like the famous hitchhiker story, don't pick up the hitchhiker. You never know what's going to happen. They may be somebody who's trying to con, swindle, or kill you. So sometimes when you hear an urban legend and it happens somewhere else and you're thinking, wait a second, that happened in the town that I grew up in. So I feel like urban legends are kind of widespread. So like it may have happened over in England. The true story may have happened over in England, but then it spread.
Yeah, I think that's really common for each town to make it their own.
Right.
It just gets spread orally from like person to person, and we all take it as fact.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make a note to our listeners that these urban legends, they are pretty interesting stories, and we wanted to make this a fun experience for all of us. So we're going to read these in story format, which is something different than we typically do. So we're going to read you these chilling tells and then kind of discuss them after each one. And here we go. Sharon, tell us your story.
I wanted to tell you the Vampire Brothers of New Orleans, and it's a haunting tale that began in the early 1930s. The Carter brothers, Wayne and John, were living what seemed to be a normal life. The brothers made a living in the southern city of New Orleans, working each night on the docks where they handled the fresh seafood off the boats. One night, a young girl walked out onto what is now known as St. Anne Street. She was covered in blood, and her wrists had been slit. Authorities rushed to the young girl and took her to the nearest hospital. Upon further investigation, it was found that her wrists were cut, but not with the purpose of killing, rather to drain blood slowly from her body. The policeman quickly raided the Carters' apartment and found 4 more people tied up to chairs with their wrists sliced in the exact same manner. The victims told the officers that the brothers kidnapped them and would drink their blood every day after work. Searching further in their apartment, police discovered 14 dead bodies drained of blood and tossed aside. The Carter brothers had not yet returned from work, so the police decided to wait and ambush Wayne and John when they arrived. And arrive they did. Now, the Carter brothers were not very big in stature, reported to be 5'6" and weighing less than 160 pounds each. Yet somehow, the brothers overtook all the police officers with a supernatural force, knocking 4 of them out before leaping from the top floor balcony. They gracefully landed on the road below and ran off quicker than lightning, a feat impossible for the average man. While very strong, the brothers were not smart. They decided to go to work the next day, and upon arrival, the police surrounded and arrested them. A few days later, they were found guilty of murder and hanged in the town square. As talk of vampires grew, the townsfolk asked that the bodies be exhumed and investigated. They wanted to know why the brothers wished to drink blood. But when the coffins were raised after only a few weeks, they were found to be empty. Locals believed that brothers never truly died and moved on to other cities to commit more of their heinous crimes and spreading vampirism as they went. Popular vampiric lore is that you become a vampire if a vampire drinks your blood 7 days in a row. Well, one of the Carter brothers' victims found in the apartment that night became a serial killer, taking lives of more than 32 people. It was reported that he too drank the blood of his victims. In New Orleans today, many people fear the vampire presence is still in the French Quarter. Even the residents of the old apartment have reported seeing a pair of men jumping from their balcony down to the street below unharmed. So it is believed that Wayne and John Carter still walk among us today, immortal and bloodthirsty.
Yikes. That's scary.
I know, I find it really scary that New Orleans locals just take vampirism as fact.
Right. Yeah. And more than just that. I mean, they believe in a lot of things that most people don't, which is why I love New Orleans.
Yes, it's such a paranormal hub. And if you go on ghost tours, this is a really common tale that they'll tell you, I found out. And they will drive you past their apartment, and it's just by like the French Quarter.
That's so cool. I don't know if there's any validity in it, but I'm going to believe that all of these urban legends are true.
Yeah, upon my research for this story, I could find that same story basically told, just slight difference in details. They all agree on the story, but there's no actual evidence of a Wayne and John getting arrested or hung. So that's where it gets a little hazy.
Right. That is a chilling story.
Yes.
All right. My story is Killer in the Back Seat. Sometime in 1964, outside of Ogden, Utah, a woman was driving alone at night down the highway. At some point along the way, another vehicle came up behind her. They drove so close they were tailgating her, and they kept flashing their lights. She got so angry and freaked out. Eventually, she pulled into her driveway. She got out and asked what the other person's problem was, and they let her know there was someone in the back seat, and that every time the man in the seat was reaching up to kill her, the other driver would flash their lights to scare him away. So I read a lot of different versions of this story. In some, there is a gas station attendant or a trucker involved, and I saw some instances there's a murder. Regardless, the takeaway is supposed to be, always check the backseat of your car before getting in.
Nice. I don't ever really check my back seat.
Never?
Not really, do you?
Yeah, always.
Good job. You will never have this happen to you.
I know. I've heard this story a lot in my life, and I think it was a typical campfire tale. And I actually think that this one may be true. Maybe not in Ogden. It could have happened anywhere, really, that someone could have been in the backseat of a car. I mean, it's very plausible if you think of how murderers are.
Yeah, I have seen, I think, a Twilight Zone episode of this, and I've seen other reenactment shows that they try to make it seem like real. Right. I don't know if it was like 911 or what show it was, but yeah, it's a story that's super common and gets told over and over.
For sure. I do remember it in the movie Urban Legends, too.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that's one of the ones I'm thinking of. Yes.
Yeah.
So always check your back seat, people.
That's right.
So our next chilling tale has a little to do with vehicles as well, or I should say transportation. Children ghosts on the train tracks. And this is a local urban legend from San Antonio, but similar tales have been told in varying cities across America. The tragic tale is usually the same. One rainy morning in 1930, a school bus full of children was crossing over the railroad tracks when something went wrong and the bus stalled, straddling the tracks. As the driver struggled to restart the bus, the train alarm signal started to sound, and the children saw a speeding locomotive coming quickly toward them. By the time the driver opened the doors and evacuated the children, the train had arrived, and the children's screams were drowned out by the screaming whistle and brakes of the deadly train. None of the children survived that horrible accident. A few years later, a man was driving down the same road and stalled on the tracks in much the same way as the bus full of children. Again, the driver struggled as the alarm started to sound, the lights began to blink, and the guard bars lowered in front and behind the man's passive car. Just before impact, the driver could feel the train bearing down on him. He ceased to struggle and squeezed his eyes shut, anticipating explosive collision. Suddenly, it was as if time stood still and everything became quiet. He felt his car somehow move, and it was as if he was being pushed to safety, guided off the tracks by an unknown force. When he and his car were out of danger from the oncoming train, suddenly sound and time came back to life, and the locomotive blared past him, just inches from the bumper of his vehicle. To this day, people flock to the tracks around Halloween because if you put your car in neutral on those tracks, it is said the children from the bus accident will push your car to safety off the railroad tracks. And if you sprinkle some baby powder on the bumper of your car, you will see small handprints start to appear in the powder from the ghosts of the poor children who died that day. So this one is a really sad story.
It is. Yeah, it's very sad.
And in researching it, I couldn't find, again, any newspaper articles of it happening in San Antonio. But what I did find is that in 1930s, there was a newspaper article published in the San Antonio Light, and the story said that this took place in Salt Lake City, and actually 26 children died, and a dozen others were seriously injured. So people are starting to think that maybe San Antonians at the time just didn't read the small print that where it happened, or that maybe that tale just had such an impact on them that somehow San Antonio adopted it and made it sound like it was their own.
Oh, we have something here in Oregon too. I think it's probably south of me. There's a small town, and that tale is from there as well. So I feel like wherever you go, you're going to find this story.
Yeah, I think so too. And if you ask any local here, they will swear up and down that they know for a fact, 100% that this happened here. They'll even tell you that the cross streets of where it happened at are named after the children who passed away, which if I looked into that, and it's actually named after someone else entirely. But people are so convinced that it's true, and they'll go to the train tracks, they'll put their car in neutral, and it'll roll back, and it actually does work. And it's been on a few TV shows. I forget the actual ones, but it's been on the news and some sort of ghost or paranormal program. But they debunked it, saying that the reason you're rolling back in neutral is because that you're on a slant hill.
Yes, for sure. I was thinking that too. I was like, I think I've seen that episode of one of the shows.
Yeah. And there have been people who have experienced the handprints, which is a little hard to debunk. But some people are saying that no matter how clean your car is, it is possible to pick up on prints. But small prints, that's kind of odd.
Right. Well, hands have their own set of oils, and sometimes they can be left behind on paint. So,
So that's where that's trying to get debunked. But I still think it's a sad tale, and it sucks that it actually did happen in Salt Lake City.
Right. And it's chilling, Anything else?
No, let's move on to our next tale.
All right. So I have the legend of the Lady in White. Most countries have a story of a lady in white. Each story is tragic and related to hauntings. For the sake of timing, I've narrowed it down to my top 2 favorites. A legend in Malta tells of a woman who was betrothed to a man she did not love. Her father ordered her to do everything her fiancé said, since he was going to be her husband. On the day of her wedding, while wearing her wedding attire, she jumped to her death off a balcony to avoid being married to a man she loathed. This is why, to this day, she is known as the White Lady. It is said that she haunts the Verdala Palace, where she has been spotted by many visitors. And my second chilling tale, it takes place in Rieda, Wiedenbrück, Westphalia, Germany. The legend of the White Lady takes a different turn. A woman is married to a prince. The prince is fighting in the 30 Years' War. While he is away, the wife foolishly takes a lover. The prince returns unexpectedly, where he catches the two while in the throes of lovemaking. The prince drowns the man in the moat outside of their home. He then took his wife and encased her behind a wall in his manor with some food and water so that she wouldn't cheat on him again. He heads back out to war. The prince dies in a battle, and the food and the water ran out for the wife, and she died. Her spirit now haunts the manor. When the manor was renovated, the new owner had his builders tear down a wall where the princess was found. The next day, the worker who tore down the wall was working on the roof of the manor when he fell, broke his back, and died. This manor is called House Aussel, and many strange happenings have occurred there since.
Wow, that story in Germany is really cool. So that actually happened?
Yeah, so apparently that actually happened. I guess they use it as a tourist kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So you can actually visit that house. And same with the first one in Malta. You can go to the Verdala Palace. And the legend was apparently based on some sort of truth. But what is interesting to me is that these legends of white ladies are all over the world. Not all of them are based on truth, but these two were definitely ones that were.
And is she just named the White Lady? Is that just like the attire she's wearing? Like a white long dress?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first lady, she was actually wearing her wedding dress.
Oh, that's right.
The theory about the second lady was that when he encased her in there, she was wearing some sort of white nightgown. Mm-hmm. And so that's why she's seen walking around their castle wearing this white nightgown.
That's really awesome. I'm going to have to look up that manor later and see what I can find.
For sure. It's pretty exciting.
And it is such a common trope, I want to say, watching like ghost hunter type TV shows where they would do reenactments when I was younger. They would always have the apparitions walking the haunted places, but it was just like an actor, and they would just make them see through as they walked around. But it's always a lady in a white dress.
I know, always. I'm not sure why that is. I mean, I've seen ghosts before. They're not wearing white dresses.
Do ghosts even look transparent?
I think it depends. Mm-hmm. So I've seen them transparent. I've seen them wispy. I've seen them as if I'm looking at somebody who may be real.
Yeah. Ooh. Mm-hmm. Very scary.
Yeah.
Should I move on to our next tale?
Yes. Let's talk about the next one.
Okay, this one is a little bit of a long story, so get comfortable. This is about finding a lone staircase in the woods. And it is a newer creepy tale said to be happening in national parks all around the world. The story goes that there are abandoned staircases that randomly appear deep in the woods. Their origins are unknown. Yet all can agree you should avoid them at all costs. The first person to tell a story of the stairs was Search and Rescue Woods, an American Reddit user who claims to be a member of a volunteer search and rescue unit. Here is their tale. Now, I don't know if this is true in every SAR unit, but in mine, it's sort of unspoken. Regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other SAR officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. And at this point, we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, and I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point, we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw one, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very empathetically that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now. I talked to EW, a former trainer, about it. He specialized in finding lost kids. He just seemed to have a sixth sense when it came to knowing where they'd gone. He sat down with me at dinner one evening, and we ended up swapping stories. Most of them were just casual, but when we got on the subject of weirder calls, I mentioned the stairs, and he got kind of quiet and asked me if I'd heard of a little boy who disappeared from his park a few years back. I hadn't, so he told me this tale. They were out looking for this 11-year-old boy, Joey, who'd gone missing near a river. Of course, the first thought was that he'd fallen in and drowned, but when they brought the dogs out, they led SAR officers away from the river and up into a very densely forested area. When we do searches for people, we search in a grid pattern, and we search every box of the grid incredibly thorough. What EW's team noticed right away was that a very strange pattern was emerging. Dogs in alternating boxes were picking up Joey's scent, but losing it when they overlapped with another box. If you think of a checkerboard, Joey's scent was being picked up in random black squares, but never in red. This, of course, didn't make any sense, because how could the kid bounce from an area to area without leaving a scent in each place he passed? EW and his partner passed into a new box of the grid, and they spot a set of stairs about 50 yards away. EW walked over to the foot of the stairs. They were small, kind of like stairs into a basement, but he could see that there was something lying on the bottom step, sort of curled up. His heart sank, because of course you always hope for the best, and they were confident that they'd find this kid alive, because he'd only been missing for a few hours. But he knew right away that it was him, and that he was dead. He was curled up in a little ball on the step, holding his stomach. It looked like he'd been in horrible pain when he died, but he didn't see any blood, except some on his lips and chin. He's never seen anything like it. My friend goes on to tell me that when the coroner opened the kid up, he couldn't even believe what he was seeing. The kid's organs were like Swiss cheese. Quarter-size holes were punched clean through just about every single organ the kid had, aside from his heart and lungs. But his colon, his stomach, his kidneys, and even one of his testicles were full of these clean holes. The coroner described it as if someone had taken a hole punch and punched holes out of everything. They were so neat. But the kid didn't have a scratch on him, no entry or exit wounds. No one had a clue what could possibly have caused it.
That's pretty creepy.
It is. I don't like the idea of not knowing what these steps are, what they lead you to.
Right. And do you believe in them?
I did at first, because I was seeing so much information and so much speculation. All these people kept commenting how they had seen them and come across them and how they were happening everywhere. But the further I looked into it, it just looked like maybe this was just a really good story.
I wanted them to be true.
Right.
Because I thought, okay, there's all this time that we can't really account for before supposedly our current humans were around. And so I thought, dang, if there's some staircase in the woods, shouldn't we be testing that archaeologically? Because I need to know the carbon dating on it. How far back does it go?
I was kind of thinking that they would appear randomly and not always be in the same location. So maybe in one area they would be there one day, but not within the next couple of minutes kind of thing.
Oh, so like they disappeared.
Right, because if these search and rescue units knew the lay of the land, they would know where to see these stairs, but I think they just appear randomly.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So when I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, they're there. And when I did a Google search, there were a bunch of pictures that came up of actual staircases in the woods.
Yeah, and they're eerie.
So, yeah. But one of them was actually, I did some research. One of the ones that always comes up is this big, huge stone staircase. And that one actually is kind of art formation that someone made out in the forest in England.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't think that all of those stairs have anything to do with weird paranormal staircases that are in the Google images anyway.
Right. And I think some of them, they were probably man-made, but, it would be interesting to find out if no one ever lived in that area in our time period, why would there be stairs out there?
I was thinking it was like a cosmic thing. I just assumed that they're being placed there maybe by aliens. And so if you go up there, I imagine maybe you would figure something out that you weren't supposed to, or maybe be taken to another dimension.
Sure, that makes sense. Like, I did think that after he claims that they found that body of the kid with the holes punched in, I was like, well, they probably did some sort of alien testing on him.
Yeah, which is so sad. Why does it have to be kids?
Yeah. And, a lot of times when we hear about abduction cases, they don't come back dead.
They're just gone?
Yeah.
Or you mean they come back and they're normal?
Yeah, they come back and they're normal. Mm-hmm. It's not like they die when they come back, or they just disappear altogether.
Yeah, why bother putting the kid back, I guess, if it was an alien?
Right. Yeah.
So maybe it's something else, but it's just the not knowing what they are that drives my brain crazy, and I love reading about them and seeing what kind of theories are out there or what other experiences are out there.
Right. And I did read that some people are like, this is complete trash, this isn't real. But you have to imagine that there's a lot of land that we typically on a regular basis, us city folk, don't go out into. So there may be some truth to the story.
That's true. Maybe even if these events are fiction, is it based on a true event?
Right. Potentially. All right. So our next story is Black-Eyed Children. Black-Eyed Children is an urban legend of supposed paranormal creatures that resemble children with pale skin and black eyes, who are reportedly seen hitchhiking or panhandling, or are encountered on doorsteps of residential homes. Tales of black-eyed children have existed throughout the years. The theories are that these children are vampires, interdimensional beings, or some form of demon. Because I was a teenager in the 90s, I remember this one being in the newspaper. I used to have this big book of strange news articles, and I remember this one being in that book. My family believed these little kids, who were reminiscent of the 1995 or 1950 movie Village of the Damned. We believed they were demons. Although I never saw one, I do know that years later, my daughter had purchased black contacts for a cosplay costume, and this was what it reminded me of. At any rate, the sightings have been reported in several places in the world, and here is one of those chilling tales. At the age of 16, Harold, who was from a small town, was walking home from a friend's house when he saw what appeared to be a small figure leaning against the fence of a house. As he approached, he noticed that it was a boy. Harold didn't recognize the boy. He approached him and started talking to him. The boy did not reply. Harold asked the boy if he was okay. The boy responded, "I want to go to your house. Take me to your house." A chill rushed through Harold. He didn't know how to respond. Harold looked at the boy a little closer, and staring back at him were a pair of solid black eyes. Harold was so terrified he couldn't move. He looked down the road and got ready to run. The boy said, "Now don't you run away from me. You're going to walk me to your house." Harold felt threatened and decided to run. He was too scared to look back, but what he heard was a screeching wail. Was it the child? Harold kept running without looking back. When Harold reached his home, he ran straight through the door, slamming it behind him. His parents asked him what was wrong. For a moment, Harold couldn't speak. After the story, his dad grabbed a shotgun and headed down the road looking for this boy. There was absolutely no sign of him anywhere. They were left wondering what had happened. Harold's mother thought it might be the devil, so she took Harold to a pastor and had him blessed. This strange encounter left no answers.
Very weird. I have never actually heard of Black-Eyed Children in depth before.
Oh, so I know that there have been stories, I think they started in the 1800s. Every time I read up on it, it was like, oh, it started in the 90s. And then that report would say, oh, it started in the 50s. And then that report would say, oh my gosh, this was back in the olden days. So I do recall reading a story that they actually found some information in a book, like from the 1800s, and it was kind of like a news report that they had found that these children had went into the town and had killed all of these goats.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, and they were all these black-eyed children, and so they think that they were vampires almost, or demons sucking the blood out of the goats.
Were there puncture wounds?
Yes, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so it was just little tales like that. I remember when I was a kid, it really did happen in Portland, Oregon, and they did some report about it in the 90s. Just some little kid had randomly knocked on a door and was trying to get inside, and the person was so freaked out, they told him to leave. So I think there was another tale that was in Texas. So it just it happened kind of all over. Mm-hmm. But as much as I want it to be true, I don't know if it really is. Yeah. I haven't seen one.
Why was the person afraid of the kid knocking on the door? What was so odd? Do you remember?
Yeah. So apparently when you come across these children, they just literally put fear through your body.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
Kind of like a Dementor.
Right. So they can will you to be afraid.
Mm-hmm. What do you think they are? Like, based off of reading on them, do they sound more like vampires, demons?
I kind of think they might be vampires because they don't age.
Okay, yeah.
So what if it's the same kids we just keep seeing over and over again?
What if it is some sort of like Lost Boy situation where it's just these kids keep turning other kids, but they're obviously much younger, which is really creepy to think about.
That's pretty interesting.
It is really interesting. I definitely need to catch up on that movie Village of the Damned.
Yes. You know, I do remember watching the old version from the 50s, but the 1990 cheesy version was actually my favorite. Or was it 1995? 1995. Yeah, that one.
That has like Kirstie Alley, right?
Yeah, Kirstie Alley and a couple of other.
Mark Hamill. I was watching the trailer, and when I saw Mark Hamill is when I knew. I was like, oh, I'm sold. I'm going to watch this.
Yeah, those creepy little children. Spoiler alert, but I think that they might not have been vampires.
In that movie.
Yeah. So you'll have to watch it for yourself. So we do hope that you have enjoyed our chilling tales.
Well, thank you for listening, and join us next Wednesday for another spooky episode. We will be discussing the Salem witch trials and other mass witch killings. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And check out our blog at cousinscoven.home.blog. We are also on YouTube, iTunes, and anywhere else podcasts can be found. Send questions or your paranormal experiences into cousinscoven2@gmail.com.
May you find happiness in your heart, love for yourself, and joy in each other. Blessings to all.